Welcome to the 18th episode of Redeeming the Time. I'm your host, Jacob Wells. This is my dad, my co-host, Keith Wells.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. You can reach us on all major platforms. If you're mouthing the words. You want to do the intro? You're just mouthing the words. Oh, man, that's funny. If you'd like to contact us, you can email us at redeemingthetimepod@gmail.com. And we're starting off hot. So...
Starting off hot. By the way, if he falls asleep or something, whatever's blooming today, he's a little out of it.
I'm highly medicated.
Hit me 2 weeks ago. I think it's pear trees. I think is what. So today's it's dogwoods right now. So there you go.
I don't like dogwoods. That was one of the jokes. That was Chris Rabe's joke. Dogwood.
Oh yeah.
Look at that.
Well, you don't like dogwoods.
I don't like dogwoods.
All right.
All right. So today we're gonna go in the sports realm again.
Oh, okay.
I saw this.
Out of movies.
I saw this question the other day, and it brought up conversation. So,
all right,
why
let's
not
hear
have
it
it on here? What sport has the best athletes?
What do you mean?
So, in the grand scheme of what an athlete is, everything that makes a person a great athlete. Running, jumping, hand-eye, speed, agility, everything. When you think about an athlete, what sport has the best athletes? So the conversation went...
It's like of the big three or just any sport?
So soccer, they can run forever, especially midfielders. They are the most conditioned.
They only know how to use half their body, though.
That's true. That was one of my arguments against it, because if you watch...
But to control a ball like that, I mean, to make it curve and to all that kind of stuff. I would say basketball is out.
Why?
Just due to their... They can't take a hit like a football player could.
That's true.
Baseball would be out to me. They
don't have the best athletes overall.
Great hand-eye coordination, obviously.
Hitting a baseball is
that's
one of the hardest things.
Hardest thing to do in sports, without a doubt. But,
Prince Fielder was not the best athlete in the world.
They can't take a hit. They can't. If you made them run a mile, most of them would be dead. That kind of thing. I'd put it somewhere up near like a rugby, football player type.
Because their
guy.
hand-eye is good.
Yeah. Hand-eye, speed, agility. I mean, when you've got guys on the line that can run, what is that, like a 4.6? That's crazy. A human being that large to be, and when the defensive guy's trying to get around, and I mean he's curved like this, getting around.
You're talking about football?
Yeah.
Oh, football. Okay.
Yeah, those guys.
Yeah, those guys are crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I just
300 pounds.
That's a massive athlete. That's a guy you would want on your to go to battle with. I mean that
well, yeah. But then, in high school I played basketball with a bunch of football players, and they could not put the ball into the rim of a basketball or kick anything.
Okay, were they linemen or were they receivers?
Were DBs. This was a DB.
All right.
He could dunk in 9th grade and just run as fast as anybody.
Okay, get a tight end out there though. Can catch, can run, can take a hit, can give a hit. I mean, that's a beast of a guy. Tight end. That's
another argument that I heard was there's no
This is flat.
The argument was for basketball against football.
Okay.
So a basketball player like Russell Westbrook could go and play in the NFL. Not every NFL player could go and play in the NBA because of the skill aspect of it.
Okay. Well, take some skinny, like Taco, whatever his name was.
Fall?
That's like, 8
There's obviously exceptions.
10, and.
But LeBron James, he could go and play tight end.
Yeah, he definitely could. And Mahomes was a baseball player, which makes him so good at
Throwing
yeah.
all those different angles.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think there is a right answer.
My answer is golf.
Golf? Tiger Woods could dunk. Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't know that.
He could dunk.
I didn't think he was that tall. How tall is he?
6-something.
Really?
6'1", 6'2".
Oh, I didn't think he was that
I
tall.
think he's around there. Yeah. Dustin Johnson can dunk.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
He'd put a hit on you.
Golf is the hardest sport to go pro in, and I will.
I would agree with that. But it's not the most athletic human being in the world. I mean, Phil Mickelson.
John Daly.
Yeah, John Daly's eating a ho-ho as he's going up to hit off the tee. He's probably drinking a six-pack between holes. Dude was a mess.
Yeah.
He's
so much a mess they made a documentary about it.
Yeah, he's not.
So I don't know what the answer is, but
all
I
right.
don't think there is an answer.
There you go. You answer. Put it in the comments.
What do you guys think?
If you're watching on YouTube or one that allows you to comment.
All right.
I know what some of your friends are going to say. UK basketball players. They're going to say that's the greatest athlete.
No.
John Wall is the greatest athlete. No.
He's too weak.
Anthony Davis, he stayed healthy this year. So, well, we'll see. I think they had to win.
They won the first playoff game.
They had to win 2 in a row to make it.
I don't know if they won.
Yeah.
I think they played tonight.
All right. Very good. Let's get into it. We're in week 18. We're finishing up the Kings and into First Chronicles.
So the first day, Monday, we've got 2 Kings 23 through 25, which is the end of Kings.
Oh, okay.
And so we just
strap in for this, right?
Yeah. So we just went in. We just came from Hezekiah, who was a great king, and then we had the worst king ever,
Manasseh.
And then we met Josiah for a brief moment last week, where he found the law.
Yeah.
And how he steered. Well, this chapter is about how he steers the nation of Judah back to the Lord.
Yeah, I called this Josiah's zeal, is how I titled this chapter. So verses 1 through 4, he assembles all the leaders, spiritual leaders also, and they read the book of the covenant to them. So they read the word of God to them. So my question as I was going through this is, what were the priests and prophets doing prior to this?
Like with Manasseh and Amon?
No, even during the first years of Josiah. What are they doing? I mean, we're several years into his reign. What were they doing as priests? I guess tradition, whatever had been the tradition passed down, religious activities and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was 18 years of Josiah's reign.
So was he 18 years old or was it his 18th year in reign? We don't know. But either way, it's interesting. My mind was like, what were they doing on a daily basis,
Yeah.
I mean, their job was to present the word of God, and they don't even know the word of God.
Yeah.
So it's just stunning to me.
Well, did they even know what their job was?
Yeah. I mean, there's been now, 55 years plus whatever up to Josiah and his dad. So it's been a long time, 57 years or something like that. So a reformation occurs in Judah under Josiah. It's pretty significant. He restores the temple. He destroys all the groves. He destroys the high places that were all the way back to Solomon. The idols that were in the temple. He even mentions by names which ones are destroyed there. And interesting there, if you know some of the names and the things around the city, they were destroyed and put in the valley outside of Jerusalem, which is the valley of waste and death, is basically what that Hinnom Valley is for. And then, if you go back to 1 Kings chapter 12, remember that prophet with Jeroboam. So Jeroboam sets up that calf and that deceives Israel. Well, Israel's gone now. Remember, Assyria attacked and took them away. So now Josiah things are going so well, and Assyria is now being a little bit held back by Babylon. It doesn't tell us that here, but we know from history that this allows Josiah to go up into Israel. So he's going outside of Judah up into this northern area, and he fulfills the scripture from 1 Kings chapter 12. and he takes that calf down that Jeroboam had put up, all the pagan priests, digs up their bones. I mean, he's this zealous about it. He digs up their bones, burns their bones, all except for that one prophet, that weird story about the prophet that was sent up there, wasn't supposed to eat or drink anything, and the lion wound up attacking him because he didn't do what he was supposed to do.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't mess with him or the guy that caused him to fall. So,
Interesting.
yeah. So this is what's going on here.
Yeah,
So,
I underlined all the times that it says the king defiled the altars, and
yeah.
or Josiah took away, or my favorite was when Josiah beat down the.
Yeah.
He's just going around just taking
This is a
everything
big
away.
deal. And you get to verses 21 through 27, and they have the Passover. And apparently this is like the grandest of all Passovers that ever occurred in the land. Josiah turned to the Lord full-heartedly, but Babylon's still coming.
Yeah.
So then the chapter keeps going on, though.
Yeah, after the Passover, then we see Egypt is the first nation to come into play with
So
being,
Assyria is weakening. So Egypt, the Pharaoh comes up out of Egypt. Now, this is important because we're going to see 3 sons and 1 grandson of Josiah that are going to take the throne, but not in that order. This is going to bounce around a little bit. So his son, first Josiah, Egypt goes up to fight Assyria on their way. I think on their way back out, they had lost that battle. Josiah goes out to fight them, and he gets killed. He gets killed in the battle. So Jehoahaz, which is one of his younger sons, actually takes the throne.
the people anoint him, right?
Right. So it almost, when you look through the names and stuff, his name means Yahweh has seized. His real name was Shalom, but that seems to have been a title. And he taking the throne, he only reigns 3 months, and he's evil. Which you and I were talking about this earlier. You know,
You just saw your dad do all this stuff to get back to the Lord.
yeah.
And then you immediately go back. You only reigned for 3 months, and in the Bible it says that you did evil in the sight of the Lord.
Yeah, how much could you do in 3 months? I mean, it's just
Which makes me think that Josiah was not liked at all by anybody, and they just went from 50-something years with paganism.
doing what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it. Yeah.
He comes in and wrecks all of that, and then as soon as he's gone, they go right back to evil.
Yeah, to me that shows just because you have a spiritual leader, the individuals have to choose to serve the Lord as well. And as a nation, he's rocked a lot of apple carts. He has taken out all this stuff. Now they're doing what he says because he's the king, but apparently not everybody was, like you said, was in there.
I feel like his officers were not on board.
Yeah.
They just did it because he was the king.
Yeah, that's the way it leans to me too. But he was a godly man, and God held off the judgment until after him. So Jehoahaz, Pharaoh Necho, that's a cool name. He takes him after 3 months in bands, and he's taken captive down into Egypt, and he dies there. So Pharaoh puts Josiah's next son, which actually I believe is the oldest son. His name's Eliakim. They change his name to Jehoiakim, and he's basically a puppet king under Egypt. He puts them under tribute, and he reigns for 11 years, and that's chapter 23.
So I took that as Jehoahaz. Egypt didn't want the people's choice of king, and wanted their own king. So they took Jehoahaz and then gave them or appointed the king that they wanted.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Well, they definitely put up the king they wanted, with Eliakim or Jehoiakim, however you want to call him. So
chapter 24, we've got the start of the exile of Judah.
Babylon's on the rise here. So Babylon's this massive empire. If you look at, you've ever looked at a map of this area, so you've got the Mediterranean Sea with Israel. Do it this way. You've got the Mediterranean Sea with Israel, and they call it the Fertile Crescent because all of this area around the desert area is is fertile, and they can grow crops, they can have livestock, that type of thing. And below that, south to southeast, is all desert. So the Babylonian Empire is all the way on the other side of the Fertile Crescent, and they're now building in power. They're overcoming Assyria. They at this point they have overcome Assyria. They're the big dog. They're really Assyria was an empire. This is the real mega empire, as we'll see, boom, boom, boom in a row, these different ones. And Nebuchadnezzar is now in power. He is not the first king, but he is the one that really starts to come into the scene for Israel.
Yeah. I found it interesting in verse 2 that all these people that they had held off or fought against, like the Chaldees, Syrians, Moabites, Ammonites,
yeah,
the
God's
Lord sends them. And
yeah, he's just letting. It's just like at the end of Solomon. Remember, at the end of Solomon, he started having these little ankle biters just started attacking him. Well, they're no longer ankle biters anymore. They're
part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So verses 1 through 5, Nebuchadnezzar, they kick Egypt out of there. Judah now becomes a vassal state under them. And like you said, all kinds of enemies come against them. And it says there in verse 4, because of what Manasseh had caused them to do, which the Lord would not pardon innocent blood. It's because of the innocent blood that was shed. I think, I think of America, I think of other countries, that have allowed so much innocent blood to be shed with abortion and.
Well, yeah, he was serving Molech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now those were children that were born already, but I mean, a child is a child.
Yeah.
I think of back a few months ago when the state of New York passed a bill that allowed a child to be aborted up to birth, and there was like a standing ovation. It's just the most sickening thought.
Yeah.
And God is going to hold us accountable for that innocent blood, and he was holding them accountable for that for sure. So Jehoiakim dies. He reigns 11 years, and his son. So now we've got the grandson. So we had a Josiah, 2 of his boys, and now his grandson under Jehoiakim. Kin. I always thought it was Chin because it's Chin, but you're right. We looked it up. Jehoiakim, he becomes king. That's probably a royal or a throne name, because you're going to see when we get into Chronicles, his name's Jeconiah or Coniah, so that's an abbreviation for it. So that's probably just a throne name.
He reigns for 3 months again.
Yeah, because Nebuchadnezzar lays siege to the city.
Yeah, we meet Nebuchadnezzar for the first time in Scripture, right? This is the first time we see his name.
Pretty much. Now, there's an interesting thing here. I didn't share this with you beforehand. So it says here that Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to the city on the 3rd month. In I forget what verse that is. Yet verse 12 states that it was in his 8th year of his reign. Okay, so how's that? How can it both be the 3rd month and the 8th year of his reign? So I was looking that up and doing some studying on it. There's 2 what I felt were good explanations. The one was maybe he co-reigned with his father as a child, and he only reigned solo for those 3 months and surrendered in his 8th year. Or another explanation was it had been the 8th year of captivity, when they laid siege during his father's reign. So to me, I think the first one's probably more accurate, that he probably co-reigned with his dad. But
yeah,
you guys can think about that. That kind of stuff drives me nuts. Those numbers have to work out.
Yeah.
But people are going to ask. It has to be consistent. And the answer of a scribe wrote it down wrong. No, we believe the word of God is inerrant, and there are answers. And many times when we look for those answers, they really give us some cool details that we would never have known if we weren't paying attention to that. Like that thing Dave Kane mentioned to us about the number of years and the captivity and how those years lined up. I would have never looked at that before, and that kind of stuff's awesome.
Yeah, so Yeah, they're being besieged right now. The city of Jerusalem, or they're being besieged, and the time frame here. So Israel was conquered in 722 BC.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably around 600s, 590.
Yeah, so they were subjugated under his dad in 605.
Okay.
Verse 30, when the enemies are going against him, that's somewhere between 601 to 650, 698. And then, so there's outside records that talk about this as well.
Yeah.
But this siege, where Jehoiakim and his wife and family, they all just surrendered. This happens, I mean, they have the exact date on this. The siege and fall of Jerusalem happened on March 16th, 597 BC.
Okay.
So that's the exact date when the city of Jerusalem falls. They take the first set of captives. So 10,000 people were taken. Anybody that was good at their job, anybody that was smart, that looked like they were going to be useful, they took them. And
they take everything that Hezekiah was so nice to show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they take the gold of the temple and the palace. They take most of it. They didn't take everything yet. And then, so they take the grandson, Jehoiakim, they take him back to Babylon, and he's in jail. And then they set up Josiah's third son. His name's Mattaniah. They change his name to Zedekiah, and he reigns there for 11 years.
And he does evil on the side of the Lord.
Right. And eventually, verse 20, he rebels against Babylon, and that's it.
Yeah.
And 586, so the first fall at 597, 586, 11 years later, complete destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, which takes us into
the last chapter of Kings.
Don't worry that we're spending so much time here, because we're going to go flying through a bunch of
the
chapters.
First 9 chapters of First Chronicles.
Yeah, they go pretty quick, so don't get upset if we're spending so much time here. I just wanted to warn them, like, because each episode's gotten longer. They're like,
So
this one won't be.
Chapter 25 is the final touches of the exile.
Yeah.
You see Zedekiah rebels against Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar has had enough. And
This is ruthless. I mean,
yeah.
this is...
So Zedekiah tries to, well, there was a famine there because they were being besieged. And so Zedekiah tries to escape one night, but is caught by the Chaldees. Is that just the Chaldees?
Chaldees, I always say.
And they bring him to Nebuchadnezzar, and this is brutal.
He gets pretty far, though. So like a year and a half, they can't get food. So they finally, a lot of their soldiers got... It says they made it to the plains of Jericho. I'd never noticed that before. That's pretty far. He's almost to the Jordan River at that point.
You think he thought he was...
Yeah, he probably thought, I'm not going to get out of here. And then they catch him. So go ahead what they do to him, because this is brutal.
They kill his entire family in front of him.
Yeah.
And then they gouge out his eyes and then take him to Babylon.
Yeah, so the last thing he saw was his family killed in front of him.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Then General Nebuzaradan, I guess is how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
We actually looked these up, but we forget, that type of thing. He goes back a little bit after that, and now the temple is completely stripped. Now, other times they were going in any kind of loose stuff they're grabbing. Here, he took down the pillars. You remember those two pillars? The one's named Boaz. What was the name of the other one? I forget. But he takes those. They're covered in brass, and completely takes the brass off of them. Everything that's hanging up, all the furnishing, cuts it up, and takes all of the brass, gold, and silver, down to even the stuff that's part of the walls.
They take anything that is of worth, pretty much.
And then the big thing is they burn the temple.
Yeah.
And any decent home, they burn the homes, and they throw down the walls.
Kill the priests, kill the officers. Yeah.
So they kill any remaining leader, and they set up a guy named Gedaliah as governor, not king, as governor. And he encourages the people, I don't know if you noticed, he encourages the people to follow Babylon. Hey, they're here, they're in charge, let's just follow them. And he was a friend of the prophet Jeremiah. God had told Jeremiah to tell him the same thing. Hey, this is of me, and you need to follow them. Well, they don't like that message. Who does? If China was to come in here and God allowed that to occur, and as a arm of correction to us, none of us would like that.
Yeah.
And they're not listening at all. And we'll see what happens here. But a question I had, how could God use wicked Babylon to take them? Well, the prophet Habakkuk, when we get there, he spends almost an entire chapter talking about that, why that's a big deal. So
then there's that random little thing at the end with.
Well, one thing prior to that. So Gedaliah, they think he's a traitor, and they wind up killing him, and
then the rest of the people flee. Right?
Yeah, they're scared, so they run
to Egypt.
Yeah, they run down to Egypt, and they take the prophet Jeremiah with them. He didn't want to go, but they take him with them. So then we get to verses 27 through 30, what you were going to bring up.
It's like a random little thing at the end. At least to me, it was after 37 years of the exile. There's a new king there in Babylon, Evil Merodach, and
that's the coolest name ever.
Best emperor name ever.
Evil Merodach.
And he shows kindness to Jehoiakim. He takes him out of prison, and he allows him an allowance all of his days. He gives him stature in Babylon.
Placed in the royal court, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
He's Nebuchadnezzar's son, and he does that. The only thing I can think of is remember, this would have been the end of Scripture until the prophets. So God gives them one bit of glimmer of hope at the end of the book. That's the only thing I can think of there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was the end of Kings, and now we get into First Chronicles, and the first 9 chapters. There's some cool stuff here, so I would.
Yeah, this is rinse and repeat, sort of.
Yeah. You go ahead on explaining what Chronicles actually is.
Okay. Yeah. So this is sort of a repeat of what we saw in 1st and 2nd Samuel. 1st Chronicles is, and then 2nd Chronicles will be what we saw in 1st and 2nd Kings. Now, in the Jewish canon, this is one book. Now, note, this is not the Chronicles of the Kings mentioned in like 1 Kings 14, 19, and on after that, because this book didn't exist yet. This was written after that. It's very similar, but it gives different details. Details that were important at the time. So this was written for folks as they were coming back into Jerusalem. So they were just taken by Syria. They were taken by Babylon. They're in Babylon for 70 some years. And then the Lord brings them back. And this is the record to reestablish the returning Israel after captivity. It shows. Now, this is important. Remember, they're given these inheritances for their different tribes. So this shows the returning people where their proper inheritance is, sets up the Levitical priesthood again, who can do the sacrifices, proper way of doing that, so the right people could do what they're needed to do. This was probably written either at the end of the captivity or right at the return. And we're going to see, due to its emphasis on the priesthood, the connection with David's monarchy, it was probably written by a priest, and most people believe it was Ezra. You were talking about that before, and I agree. It probably was Ezra or someone very close to him that knew that. So that gets us into it.
Yeah, so the first 8 or 9 chapters is going through those genealogies and everything. So, and then it gets more into snapshots of the history that we have already read.
Right, gets into David and on to there. Now, don't just skim through. I mean, yeah, that's the wrong way of saying. You can skim through, but I want you to notice some things here.
So we're in Tuesday now,
yeah,
and we've got the first 2 chapters here.
Yeah, so notice on the opening verse, it shows us sort of from the outset that this isn't your normal genealogy, because they're real selective. It could have said Adam, Seth, Enosh. Well, it could have said Adam, Cain, Abel, Seth. It doesn't do that, so it skips that kind of stuff. And it goes directly to the line of Seth. Now, you'll see some of the names, the typing of the name is just a little bit different, so don't get all worried about that. But there's a selective genealogy here, and there's going to be a reason for that because he's setting up who's coming back. So verses 4 through 23, you've got Noah and his 3 sons and their sons and their descendants, and there's an emphasis for the people of that day. Mentions verse 10, Nimrod, the people that built up Assyria and Babylon. It's mentioning the people they knew. It could have mentioned all of them, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It mentions Kesum, the father of the Philistines. Verse 13, Canaan, all the descendants that they were dealt with. Peleg, the dividing of the languages and the people. It's interesting. Verse 17, it's interesting. They also included Shem's descendants that had held Israel captive, that would eventually become the Persians. I mean, those are the people that they're mentioning there. Not everyone like we saw at the beginning of the Word of God.
Yep.
Then we have Shem, and it goes directly to Abraham. Could have mentioned anyone else, but it goes directly to Abraham. And then it systematically starts to go through Abraham's descendants. Yeah. Ishmael's descendants, Keturah's son, his handmaid that he had, or a concubine that he had after Sarah died, her son. And then it ends with Isaac and his sons and goes with Esau first. So we see God's movement in man, this sort of sweep of history. God gives Adam a 3rd son. God saves man through Noah and his 3 sons. We see the rise of a man in Nimrod, the dividing under Peleg. We see God call out a man named Abraham and his journey to the promised son Isaac. We see God bless Abraham's descendants as he chooses those, Isaac, and then the next chapter we're going to see Jacob over Esau. So we have spiritual man, earthly man. We have the second man over first man. We see this comparison all over. Yeah. That's sort of cool. So
yeah. And then in chapter 2,
I see more there than I do in any of the other ones. So so don't.
I'm not
fret. So
chapter 2, it starts with the sons of Jacob,
yeah.
But then specifically goes down the lineage of Judah all the way to David.
Yeah, could have started with any of them, right?
Yeah, could have started with the firstborn, but then you see that later on. They start with the one that's most important.
Yeah.
And because obviously David, and then it goes
exactly
to Jesus.
Right. So they're setting this up, and this guy who's writing this genealogy, God inspires him and to start with Judah. Jesse, so we can get to David as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Achan's mentioned in there. That's interesting.
Since 1 Samuel 17 is like one of my favorite chapters where David's anointed, you see like David's brothers' names in here.
Yeah.
Because it only gives 3 in 17, in 1 Samuel 17, so I thought that was cool. I also never realized that Joab was related to David.
We talked about that, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I forgot, but that Joab is his nephew. Yeah, so yeah. I guess
which adds a whole complexity to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So you're like, why would he put up with this guy? Okay, he's family, and he stuck with them through the whole time. It also mentions them and Amasa at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's then verses 18 through 24. God traces another grandson of Judah, Hezron, the son of Caleb. Now, this is not the Caleb of the 12 spies, the son of Jephunneh. This is a different one. We're going to see him in
the next chapter, right?
Yeah. Why mention all these people of Judah, you think?
I don't know.
The only thing I could think is,
'cause you also have Jerahmeel's family too.
All these people that are heading back to Israel after the exile. They're heading back to Jerusalem. Most of them are going to be from the tribe of Judah. That would be my thinking, is they needed that. They needed that detail.
Yeah.
Occupying, their territory and all that kind of stuff. It does mention another Caleb, the great grandson, in verse 49. It doesn't say the son of Jephunneh, but some people think that might. But it does mention his daughter's name. So is that the same Caleb? There's a whole bunch of stuff I looked into that. I was not I couldn't come up with a clear, what I felt was a clear description of that. So I'll let you guys study that on your own. I didn't want to muddy the waters too much on that, but interesting look. So then we get to chapter 3.
We're into Wednesday.
Yeah, see, I told you we were going to go quicker. And, this is David's lineage. So we went from man all the to Abraham to Jacob to Judah and now to David. So we're going down there.
It starts with the sons that he had in Hebron and then the ones that he had in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just establishing that Davidic line, gives us a snapshot of it.
And in verses 4 through 9, it mentions Bathsheba. That's Bathsheba. I mean, you probably figured that out. But just in case we're wondering, some of these names are spelled a little different and for different reasons. Then verses 10 through 16 goes through every king. Just gives the royal lineage there.
Yeah, just in 6 or 7 verses goes over everything we went over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, here you go.
Quick snapshot of it.
And then in verses 17 through 24, this gives the lineage while they're in captivity and as they come back.
Okay.
So this is after Jehoiakim and any of the other sons that are there. Zerubbabel will come up. We'll see him.
I love Zerubbabel.
And so that's what's going on there.
I think I just like the name.
Yeah, that's a cool name.
Zerubbabel.
That should be.
Yeah.
Call him.
Imagine saying that every time you want to talk to you.
What would we call him? Zerubi? Zeruba?
Zubs.
Zubs.
There's already a Zubs.
We know a Zubs already.
Zub. So, Zubby. We're going downhill.
We need to let Callie know. That would be a great name. We said it here first.
Yes.
All right.
Moving on. Chapter 4. Then we go back to the descendants of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
And it highlights Jabez here as an honorable Jabez
Mm-hmm.
as an honorable man, because he asked God, verses 9 through 9 and 10 here. He asked God to protect him and bless him,
there's a whole book, The Prayer of Jabez. That was when you were like a toddler. That book came out, a real small book, and the guy takes that just fragment by fragment, and goes into it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing there.
So in verse 13, is that the Othniel?
Yeah, that's him.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
The first judge. Yeah, so this Jabez's only mention, but it's because of his faith in God, and the hand of God was on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get the Caleb son of Jephunneh's lineage.
So this is the guy.
This is the give me that mountain guy.
Yeah. Interesting. There are some points. Verse 18 mentions this Bethia, Pharaoh's daughter. There's an actual date on that outside of the Bible as well. So that was before 1800 BC. So if you're trying to figure out where you are in the spectrum, that's where that is. I thought it was cool. Verse 23, it talks about, I mentioned this at the Wednesday night service yesterday, filming this on Thursday. It mentions the special group that served the king with their different talents. I find that cool that God mentions that. He sees all of our service, no matter what it is in life, whatever your talent is. We just had a young lady here that's a missionary in Guinea, and her, she's a pharmacist, a pediatric pharmacist in Guinea, Africa, and God's using it to reach an entire group of people that barely know the language, and yet they're able to just change their lives. So
it's cool.
Pretty cool.
Physical need into a spiritual.
Yeah. The end of that chapter shows the lineage of Simeon, and they're somewhat of a nomadic people and scattered. We'll come back to that in a minute.
And they're like conquest against the Amalekites.
Yeah.
Talks about that a little bit.
That's it for 4. We get into chapter 5.
This highlights the tribes on the east side of Jordan. So you have the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half of Manasseh. Yeah. And it starts with Reuben, and so it started with Judah here in chapter 2, I think, and now it's getting to the firstborn, and it explains why.
It does in great detail here.
And because he
For as much
defiled
as he
his-
defiled his father's bed, his birthright, remember he slept with Bilhah, the handmaid, or whatever you would call her, was given unto the sons of Joseph. So his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, and the genealogy is not reckoned after his birthright. And for Judah prevailed over his brethren, and of him came the chief ruler, but the birthright was Joseph's. So it's stripped from him.
Yeah.
Now I found this also interesting in verse 6.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I just thought it shows which of his descendants was taken by Tiglath.
Yeah, Tiglath-Pileser.
But it says, Pilneser in that verse, which, whatever, it's still the same guy. But
So what I found interesting was the 2.5 tribes that decided not to go into the promised land, but to stay outside of it on its edge, are the very first ones to be taken captive by Assyria. I mean, you stay on that
geographically, too.
yeah. I mean, you stay on that fringe,
Yeah.
you're ripe for the picking. And if
Yeah, they were the closest to him.
Yeah.
And they weren't protected by...
Right. They weren't among their brethren. You want to stay on the fringe of your church family and never get involved and never in each other's lives. You are ripe for picking every time, and you just see it you see it all the time, and you just, come on, be part of the family of God, and protect yourself, protect your family, and that doesn't happen, unfortunately. I think that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So
then it gets into Gad's descendants, and then it's something I saw. It highlights the military achievements of these tribes.
Yeah.
And it just talks about how great
An
they
area
were.
that they took, yeah.
But ultimately they were taken into captivity because of their disobedience. And then we have one chapter in Thursday. Chapter 6 is the only chapter on
Really?
Thursday. Yeah.
It's a long one.
Yeah, and
all God's people said, amen.
and we reach Moses and Aaron and the Levites here in this chapter.
So we have the lineage of Levi, yeah.
So it starts their attention with Aaron and his lineage here, and the last being Jehozadak, which was the priest that was brought into captivity, which I also thought was cool that it names, which it makes sense because they had to have those details coming back.
So now we're going to go all the way back to Genesis. If you remember, in Genesis 34, Simeon and Levi, as the actual men, not the tribe, they go up into Shechem. They do that whole thing because their sister was dishonored. They wind up killing all the men of Shechem. Sort of a crazy little account there. And then their dad, in Genesis 49, 5 through 7, when he gives his prophecy / blessing on them, he tells them they're going to be scattered within the tribe. They're going to be scattered, is what he says. So now we see Simeon. They're scattered to the point where they're almost absorbed into Jacob. And we see that in the earlier chapter, 2 chapters ago. But Levi, they're scattered, but because when they're out in Exodus 32, when the whole golden calf thing happened at Mount Sinai, they stood up and they followed the Lord and Moses. Now instead, they're divided in little cities all over, but they're divided as a blessing to the rest of the.
Yeah.
So the prophecy comes about, but they're divided as a blessing throughout, where Simeon is, because of their unfaithfulness, they're just absorbed into what goes on there. So pretty cool.
My Bible has. Go ahead.
Go
I'm
ahead.
going into 31.
Oh, God, I got one at 15.
Okay.
Note, underline verse 15 as you're reading through here. It says, how'd you say it? Jehozadak?
Yeah.
That's a cool name. Went into captivity when the Lord carried away Judah and Jerusalem by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. The Lord carried them away. So because of their disobedience, God is using, we know he's using just Babylon simply as an instrument, But it didn't say Nebuchadnezzar carried them away. The Lord carried them away. I thought that was very interesting that it points out there.
Yeah.
What verse were you going to next?
31.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so we get Levi's lineage, and then we get into the singers. This is what my
Musicians,
Bible.
yeah.
Yeah, the musicians in the house of the Lord. And the thing that is 39, and his brother Asaph. Is that the Asaph that...
Of Psalms?
Yeah, of
Yep.
Psalms? Okay.
Yeah. And then there's another guy prior to that, Heman or verse 33. Yeah. No, not
Herman?
it's not Herman. old Hank. I don't know. Yeah. So this points to that he was a singer. Asaph was, and they're brothers to each other. It's a pretty good study, actually. If you want to go through there and just type in, like, go to blueletterbible.com or something like that, and type in their names, and you'll get to see where they pop up. They were very influential.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, it says, as you're reading through there, it says they ministered. I love that word. Verse 32, and they ministered before the dwelling place of the tabernacle of the congregation with singing. If you're a person that doesn't see the importance of music, the Lord does. And David, being a man after God's own heart, saw the need of it, and he, being a musician himself, he organized it. And there is an importance for music in God's house. So,
49, you get the duties of the priests or the sons of Aaron.
Yeah.
It's explained there, and then you see all the cities that were given to the Levites, and all that jazz.
Yeah, so they separate out the Aaron, who is a Levite, but his specific family, because they're the priests, and then all the rest of the Levites.
Yeah.
And you notice all the detail, which once again would make you think this was written by
Ezra.
a Levite. Yeah, Ezra, yeah.
So now we're into Friday. We've got the next two chapters, 7 and 8, and chapter 7 has the lineages of Issachar, Benjamin, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Asher.
That's a big chapter.
Yeah.
Verse 13, there's one tribe that's not mentioned in these, and that's Dan. And a lot of folks think it might be mentioned in verse 13. Bilhah had two kids. She had Naphtali, and she had Dan. And it says the sons of Naphtali. It mentions their name, the sons of Bilhah. So possibly that's where Dan's included there. We don't know. If not, he's not mentioned at all. But possibly there. The end of verse 15's got your favorite ladies.
Zelophehad.
Yep. His daughters make it again. They're in the Bible more than like
the guys that
the mighty men,
that
David's mighty men and all.
Shamgar.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets one verse. They get like 20.
Yeah.
These famous ladies.
I also thought it was interesting that they number the amount of soldiers that each tribe had.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is that showing the amount of men they had, or?
I don't remember, actually.
So I just thought that was interesting. Each one was
at the time when they came back, or the time when they were.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that again. I didn't pay much attention to that part.
Yeah. So then you got chapter 8. You have the focus being on the Benjamites, and why? Because King Saul was.
Yeah, because they had just mentioned Benjamin in chapter 7, and now we're gonna head back to Benjamin again.
Yeah. So this tracks down from Benjamin all the way to Ner, who begat Kish and begat Saul.
I think another reason they might have mentioned Benjamin again is because Jerusalem, that is the Benjamin territory. So there would have been a lot of them coming back as well. But the majority of it's because of King Saul.
Yeah, because the next chapter, it starts going into...
there's one chapter on Saul.
Yeah, so...
Which is
crazy.
Interesting. Now, when you're in verse 34, you'll see of Saul's lineage, Meribah, that's Mephibosheth. Just, there's some reasons for that, but, you can look all that kind of stuff up. First Chronicles 9.
So now we're into Saturday.
Oh, okay.
We got 9 through 11 today.
So now it starts to talk about those that have returned. Now, we've not talked about anything that happened in exile yet. That's going to be later books like
Ezra,
Daniel and Ezekiel and stuff like that. But
oh, yeah, true.
then after that 70 years, we now jump to this chapter. So, and then they're going to backtrack all the way to King David again, or King Saul and then King David. But here it shows verses 1 and 2, they were carried away for their transgressions. Once again, it repeats that. And then verse 2, it says, now, so speaking of that exact time, now the first inhabitants that dwelled in their possession in their cities were the Israelites, the priests, the Levites, the Nethinims. So I find there's a couple things here. They're called Israelites again. It's no longer Israel north, Judah in the south. Now they're Israelites. They're combined again. It's the country of Israel. They're God's chosen people. Always have been God's chosen people, but they're one people again because that whole Assyria thing and Babylon has brought them together. So they dwell in their possessions, and he mentions 3 people here: priests, Levites, Nethinims. The priests, Aaron's family, they're the ones doing the sacrifices. The Levites, they're the ones working in the temple. The Nethinims, these are basically servants given to do temple work. And they're back. They're given roles to do. Verses 3 through 9, when we get to Nehemiah, there's a list of these people in chapter 11, almost exactly the same. But these are the post-exilic, post-exile people. Everything from the priests to the gatekeepers. And then once again, we get the lineage of Saul.
Which I think is just a backdrop or context for the next chapter, where it talks about Saul.
Go ahead.
So this is a brief synopsis of Saul's defeat and death. So you don't get any of his reign. You just
don't get any of it.
You go straight to his defeat. And
what do you think? I mean,
I just think
it's selective again, right?
Selective because it doesn't matter what he did, because they're more focused on the good things that David did. Is what I took it.
Right. Well, because David's lineage is the kingdom.
Yeah.
King Saul, one and done.
Yeah. So it gives the brief history of that he was king and how he died.
Yeah.
And so how the Philistines killed him and his sons in that battle that we talked about, and how Saul didn't want to be taken, so he
committed
suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it highlights the disrespect here that of Saul's body that the Philistines did to him.
And then the bravery of the people of Jabesh Gilead.
Yeah. So, but in verse 13, so Saul died for his transgressions, which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it.
Yeah.
The witch of Endor or whatever.
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting that it mentions that account. And so like you said, they go and get his body and give him a proper burial.
So we get to 11 and we finally get to David.
Mm-hmm.
There's some interesting stuff here. You're going to find it's almost exactly the same, but occasionally they'll add some details that we didn't have in 2 Samuel, which is always cool. I mean, it's like when you read the 4 Gospels. Matthew will give us the timeline and some different details because he's writing to the Jewish folks, and then you have Mark, who's writing to more of a Gentile audience, so he gives additional details, and that's what we're having here because now we have this new generation. Verse 2 shows that Israel acknowledged. So we're going to go. We've just built ourselves to the exile, and now we are shifting back all the way to David again, and we're going to stay here, and we're going to work our way back to where we were. So if that's aggravating to you, that's what's going on. They acknowledge God's call on David. Interesting there is no mention of the 7 years of him king in Hebron. They go instantly to the time where he becomes the full king of Israel.
Yeah, in verse 1 it mentions Hebron, but it doesn't give anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So he had been king for 7 years under Judah, and they start here. In that
Why?
verse,
Is it just the same thing that we've been saying? Cause
I think it's all bringing Israel back together
Yeah.
as a nation. None of this separate stuff anymore.
Mhm.
I saw a good thing here on leadership, though. It says, they say in verses 2 around there, "Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be ruler over my people Israel." So a leader of God's people must be of God's people. We see demonstrate the ability to lead, and there was an evident call from God on him, and that's true no matter what. So they take him, he becomes king, and they decide in verses 4 through 9, instantly, we got to go take Jerusalem.
Kick out the Jebusites.
Yeah. And here's something new that's not in 2 Samuel, is David takes the Jebusite castle, but he lives in it. I'd never noticed that before. I was like, doesn't mean anything, but he lives in it. And then it says Joab was responsible in verse 8 for rebuilding the city. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You don't know that detail.
No.
That's a lot of work. That's not a guy that just wins battles. He's actually, a city builder here.
Yeah, and in verse 6 it says that he went first up and was chief, and then in 8 it says that he repaired. So he's just doing it all.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting. You and I were talking about this before. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Remember, Joab just killed Abner. If you remember all the way back to 2 Samuel, and David's hacked off. He's like, what am I going to do with these guys? He's my nephew. What am I going to do with this guy? So he tells him the first one up. He's already his chief captain. And he says, the first one up to take this city becomes the captain. And was David hoping somebody else would?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think so. I think that he was his nephew, and I think he felt locked in having him as the chief.
Because remember with Absalom, he tells him not to kill, and he winds up killing Absalom.
He's just a loose cannon.
And then he lets Amasa become the chief instead. So it's like there are multiple times they go through this cycle together.
Yeah.
I know we've given him a lot of time, but I thought that was very interesting.
Yep. And the rest of the chapter illustrates the military feats and the David's mighty men and all the things that he did. And
recaps that whole story about them going to get the water in Bethlehem. Yeah.
And Adullam, and still
Yeah.
just running through the Philistines like crazy men. And then it talks about Abishai and how he killed 300 men with a spear. And then Benaiah, how he killed an Egyptian giant, a guy that was super tall, and he kills him with his own spear. And just all these cool accounts. And I thought it was interesting. I don't know. I haven't really studied it, but in verse 21, it's talking about Abishai, and it says, of the three, so Abishai, Joab, and Benaiah, of the three, he was more honorable than the two. Howbeit he attained not the first three. And
So
then in Benaiah, it also says in 25, but attained not the first three. Behold, he was honorable among the 30, but attained not the first three. So I guess he wasn't. I don't know. It says that he was honorable. Both men were honorable, but they did not attain the level that Joab attained.
So they were more honorable, but he was the one that got the power. Is that what you're reading?
That's what I am. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was not honorable.
No, it was not. And it talks about Joab, how he was the chief in 6 and 8 here, but it does not say anything about his military feats.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I think that's just because it was self-evident because he was the chief. That's my personal opinion on that.
But it doesn't ever say that he's not honorable, so it doesn't say
Yeah,
that.
so he's not.
But these guys were, and they were not.
So
Because Benaiah was the guy that was David's henchman.
So
remember?
the question is, when it says these men came to him,
or Solomon's henchman, right? Yeah, because does Benaiah kill Joab?
I believe so.
Yeah, he's the one that Solomon,
Right.
he has, yeah.
So all these guys come to him when he's, not most of these guys come to him when he is in the wilderness hiding from King Saul. If we go all the way back to 1 Samuel. Were they mighty men there? Or were they just, because it says, these are disgruntled people, they had problems. And now many of these guys have become mighty men.
Yeah.
And is David a mighty king without these men? I think the answer to both is no. I think they became mighty because they followed a man that was able to create incredible loyalty in people. And the whole Bethlehem water thing shows that they were loyal to him. He was able to create that loyalty. And then he becomes mighty as a king, obviously because God blesses him, but also because these men, they're going to give their life for him. And they build off of his strength. Here's the guy that killed Goliath as a young boy, and gives them the strength. I think that's just an interesting study there about how we build each other up. And
for sure, yeah.
So where we don't become arrogant, like, look what I did. No, it's a give and take here. We build each other up. It's the whole ironing, sharpening iron type situation. So if you're looking for something in that chapter, that's what I get out of it.
Yeah, I just love those accounts where Abishai is defeating 300 guys with a spear.
Pretty cool.
So then we get into Sunday, which we've got chapter 12 through 14, and we find this is where David is the furthest away from God here when he is in Ziklag, in the Philistine city. And it talks about the mighty men, helpers of the war. They were armed with bows and could use both the right and the left hurling stones.
Yeah, that's cool.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, ambidextrous with their hands with these weapons.
So that, and then it goes on and tells us, lists the people that were with him during that time.
Yeah, those that came to him while he was in Ziklag and Hebron. New there, verse 18. I didn't know this before, but his nephew, how do you say it? Amasa.
Yeah, I don't. Amasa. Amasa.
Shemiel Shemazel. Yeah, that's right.
Shemi Shemai.
We were talking about the other day. Now, he's in 2 Samuel, we only hear him when he becomes his son Absalom's captain.
Yeah.
But now we see he came to him all the way back then. So David, it's his nephew, but he has been part of the scene the entire time. So I don't know what's going on during his kingdom that so disgruntled him that he was willing to follow Absalom. But we've got him here.
Yeah.
A cool thing that is found in 23 through 40, it talks about these.
In verse 19, it goes over what happens in 1 Samuel 29, where God protected David from fighting his own people.
Yeah.
It gives it one verse, which I thought was. I just thought it was cool.
Yes, the Philistines we're not going to fight with him. He's going to turn and go with his king. Saved him from killing his own people. Yeah. There's a verse in 23 through 40. It talks about these good men. Not of double heart is the term that's used there. I found these are loyal men, not of double heart, meaning they're not wishy-washy. When you think of David, it's one thing with any person, but it's one thing to win over a person that's always changing. It's quite a different thing to win over a person that is deeply loyal. I mean, that means that you have shown character over an extended period of time and they have found you to be trustworthy. That's a great honor if someone is willing to do. When you get a person that is not of double heart.
Yeah.
I love that.
In 38, it says, and all the rest of Israel were one heart to make David king.
Yeah.
Too.
And the last phrase, for there was joy in Israel.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah. Kind of, or whoever wrote it, saying, at one point, we were a thriving nation.
Yeah.
So then chapter 13.
Got 4 lines.
Yeah. It's highlighting the moving of the ark from, I think, Kirjath Jearim, that's where it was.
Yeah.
And it's moving it and explains what happened with Uzzah when he put his hand out.
It's almost verbatim of 2 Samuel 6. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, the thing that stuck out to me with this account was that they left it in Obed-Edom for 3 months, and like that family was blessed for keeping it. I don't. For me, it doesn't. It's just weirdly fascinating to me because why is that in there? They could have just
God's presence there at the Ark.
That's why I'm.
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant. So yeah, God bless.
With David getting upset that it happened and that this family is blessed for keeping it. I don't know. The whole, just an odd.
I liked verse 3. It said, "And let us bring again the ark of our God to us." The last part of the verse. "For we inquired not at it in the days of Saul." So he has completely turned the country around to serving the Lord. And they weren't doing that during Saul, which we know. But, I mean, that was his reasoning for bringing it up to Jerusalem. It wasn't this big show. He did make a show of it, but it was a parade in a good way.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
And then we get to his victories in chapter 14.
Yep, chapter 14. So the first line got me because I was reading the Holman Bible Atlas, and they were talking about architecture. So,
okay,
in the Holman Bible. So Hiram, king of Tyre. So this is Phoenician. Tyre up in.
Yeah, this is the guy that helped Solomon give all the materials. Yeah.
And it was the Bible Atlas. They were talking about the temple shows Phoenician architecture, and Ahab marries Jezebel, who was the queen of Sidonian, who was also Phoenician. And during that time, politically, and they were booming. Spiritually, they were so far away from God. They were so evil. But that connection, because Omri makes a pact with the Phoenicians, and they come down, and their architecture style was huge stones.
Okay.
Instead of little ones that like were placed together to make something beautiful, there was just huge stones next to each other, and I just thought that was interesting. That from David to even with Ahab, they were using Tyre and Sidon and that's why they look that way.
Oh,
I'd never heard that. It wasn't any other.
Yeah, there's no symbolism behind the large stones, right?
No,
like
there's
there is
nothing
with the tabernacle. The temple's completely different, other than the furnishings. Yeah,
it's just it looked like Phoenician stuff because David asked of Hiram, and Solomon builds it with their carpenters and their masons, and then Ahab, they built a bunch of stuff, and Omri
up in the northern kingdom.
Yeah, but they built a bunch of stuff up there, and it all looks like Phoenician because of that connection between them.
I've never heard that before.
Nerd stuff, but I just thought it was interesting.
We see now David, verses 4 through 7, his children that were born in Jerusalem. One thing I'd point out there is Nathan. That is a name you just don't pay attention to. But Nathan, as you go to Luke chapter 3 or 4, that shows the lineage of Jesus' mother, Mary. She is through David, through the son Nathan. Not through Solomon, but through Nathan. And there's some reasons for that. But so we see that. David's, another verse 12 talks about some of his battles. They beat the Philistines and they leave their idols. He makes sure they're burned. Mm-hmm. I think that's good.
I also thought, we might have talked about this. The Philistines were probably not happy. They were probably pretty salty that David is now the king.
Oh, yeah.
They were just with him for over a year, or I forget how long it was, and now he's the king.
Yeah, and they're all like, "I told you, yeah. I told you," whatever that one guy's name was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be part of the reason why they're coming to attack.
Well, it says they heard. Yeah, verse 8. And when the Philistines heard that David was anointed king over Israel, they come up after him.
Yeah.
They went out against them.
Like, are you kidding me? He was right on our grasp.
We could have killed him.
Yeah.
Remember when he was there and acting like a crazy guy?
Yeah.
This is your fault. That kind of thing.
Yeah. So again, David, in both of those battles, he inquires of the Lord before. I thought that was interesting as well.
So if you go back to 2 Samuel chapter 5, we have the same thing here about the ones with the mulberry bushes. So
I thought that I was talking with my mother-in-law, Jennifer, and I didn't notice that at first with the mulberry. Like they knew when to go to battle with
when they heard.
That's pretty cool. Because it shows that the Lord was before them.
Right.
And I didn't catch that, and she pointed that out to me.
The cool thing about that is, first, he asked God. So it's not normal. He would have just gone straight out to battle. So he listened to how God would have him to do it. And then the second thing is hearing that he had to wait till he heard God's movement and then join him. And if you've ever done the experience, we've done this before, the Experiencing God book by Henry Blackaby, one of the greatest books that in modern day for helping in discipleship. And he tells us, look where God is working, and adjust, and follow the Lord. God puts you in this situation where you have to make a decision. Am I going to follow you? We don't come up with, okay, I'm going to do this for God and hope God blesses it. That's not how God works. God is working his will out in the world, and when we see God working, he reveals that to us, and we have a decision. Are we going to step out by faith and follow in his work? That's sometimes the difficulty with ministry mindset, where you have this ministry, like churches like we have, and like, are we following the Lord with that ministry, or this is how we do it, this is how this ministry has to work, versus following the Lord and being flexible to listening for the mulberry trees and adjusting and allowing our hearts to follow God, not a ministry model. That's a method. That's not God. Mm-hmm. And to me, this is in 2 Samuel 5:24, the same account. There's a phrase he says, "Bestir thyself." So when you hear the wind in the top of the mulberry bushes, bestir thyself. Now that's not a term we use anymore, but get involved, stir yourself up, and get out there. I love it. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. And so I'll end with that. Bestir thyself. That's a great one. All right. Good stuff.
Yep.
We weren't 2 hours.
It was an hour and a half last week. So I forget who told me this joke, but I have it in my phone. I have a note in my phone. I don't remember, and if you told me this, I'm sorry. I don't.
Well, tell us, and we can say it for next week or something like that.
So
I didn't give your mom credit
yeah.
for hers, the one I told.
Yeah. Did you get in trouble?
No.
So, what did the window designer name their 2 kids? Kurt and Rod. I'm pretty sure it was a middle schooler, and I wrote it down. But
Kurt and Rod.
Kurt and Rod.
Yeah, please end on that. That's terrible.
It's amazing. I get so many nice comments about my jokes. It just makes me feel good and
just being nice. You guys have a great week. Love you guys.